So, the MLB All Star Rosters just dropped last night, and as always, there's almost nobody happy with it. A bunch of people are upset, and we're going to talk about that today. Who got snubbed? Who maybe shouldn't have been there? Regardless, leave a like down below on the video, subscribe to the channel for plenty more baseball content coming very soon. Now, the starting lineups we've known for a little bit in the American League. It's Adley at catcher, Vlad Jr. at first, Jose Altuve at second, Jose Ramirez at third base, Gunnar Henderson at shortstop, the outfield being Steven Kwan, Aaron Judge, and Juan Soto, and Yordan Alvarez is the designated hitter. And then in the National League, William Contreras behind the dish, Bryce Harper at first, Ketel Marte, Alec Bohm, and Trey Turner rounding out the infield. The outfield of Christian Yelich, Fernando Tatis Jr., Jurickson Profar, and Shohei Ohtani at the DH spot. Which, I'm going to be honest, I don't really have too many major qualms with the starting lineups. Of course, that's 100% fan voted. You know, you start out with basically everybody as a contender, and then it's narrowed down to about 2 per position, and that factors in who's going to start for the All-Star game. Mind you, injuries happen, but this should be how the starting lineups are going to look. And overall, I think they look pretty good, like I said. But it's the reserves that a lot of people seem to take issue with. For the American League, it's Carlos Correa, Rafael Devers, Jarren Duran, David Fry, Riley Green, Josh Naylor, Isaac Paredes, Salvador Perez, Marcus Semien, Kyle Tucker, and Bobby Witt Jr. And I think that group is nearly perfect. Gonna be honest, I don't know how Marcus Semien is an all-star. Well, I know why he's an all-star, but by numbers, he's the 64th best position player, below average hitter. He's played in a lot of games, and most importantly, he's on the defending champs, who's coached by Bruce Bochy. So I think that kind of gets him on the team. I get why. It certainly has been done before. It doesn't make it good. It shouldn't happen. There's just no way you could put Semien over some of the guys we're going to talk about a little bit later. I will note that Kyle Tucker, it looks like he will not play. He's still going to be injured until after the All-Star break. So that right there is a slot that is going to be replaced. So a snub that we'll talk about it a little bit is going to enter into the roster. And then the pitchers from the American League. Tyler Anderson, Corbin Burns, Emmanuel Clase, Garrett Crochet, Logan Gilbert, Clay Holmes, Tanner Houck, Seth Lugo, Mason Miller, Cole Reagans, Tarek Skubal, and Kirby Yates. Now, a big thing, again, we have to remember is every team has to have a representative at the All-Star game. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Pitchers, it's difficult. For one, a handful of these guys probably won't play, because if it's a starting pitcher and they have a start the day before the All-Star break begins, if they start on that Sunday, for example, they're almost guaranteed not to pitch. And a lot of times that spot is replaced. They're still named an All-Star, but someone else fills in on that spot for them. So that's something you have to remember. Let's talk the National League, the reserves. We've got C.J. Abrams in Washington, Pete Alonso, Luis Arraez, Mookie Betts, Ellie De La Cruz, Freddie Freeman, Teoscar Hernandez, Ryan McMahon, Jackson Merrill, Marcell Ozuna, Elliot Ramos, Brian Reynolds, and Will Smith. Again, a note here, Mookie Betts, he will not be back until August, so he won't play. That's a spot that will be replaced. You do notice a couple things here. There's a certain team in New York that I think had a couple snubs that we'll talk about in a little bit, but I'm glad to see the young guys like Jackson Merrill and Elliot Ramos get represented in the All-Star game. Both of their teams had more than the required one All-Star, so I think that's great that they're getting their love. Ellie De La Cruz is in there having a nice year in Cincinnati. Overall, pretty good list. And we'll round things off with the pitchers. Tyler Glasnow, Ryan Helsley, Jeff Hoffman, Shota Imanaga, Reynaldo Lopez, Chris Sale, Tanner Scott, Paul Skeens, Matt Strom, Ranger Suarez, Robert Suarez, Logan Webb, and Zach Wheeler. Awesome to see Paul Skeens in the All-Star game. Of course, he's been electric ever since he came up with Pittsburgh, and it's just great to see. Now, there's no absolute finite. You need this many innings pitched, this many plate appearances to make the All-Star game. And I think you notice something like that with David Fry, who's not a qualifier in terms of stats. He's quite a ways off, but he still makes it. And Paul Skeens, he's had, I think, only 10 starts, but he's been good enough, and you see the talent, and he deserves to be at the All-Star game. So I like to see that. Overall, I think really, throughout all the starting lineups and all the reserves, I can't really pick anybody that does not deserve to be there. There are some guys that I would have over some of the reserves, and we'll talk about that, and some guys that it's just unfortunate that they're not quite on the roster, and hopefully they will be an injury replacement or somehow get their due respect, but I can't really pick out one individual who's like, yeah, they have no business being at the All-Star game. But like I said, let's talk some snubs. Some guys that probably should be there, and hopefully we'll find some way on the roster. For my Twins, Jose Miranda. He doesn't quite qualify for batting leaders, but he just came off of a record-tying 12 at-bat consecutive hit streak, which hasn't been done since the 50s. And even if you stretch the qualifiers out, like give him 50 more plate appearances, he's about a top 10 hitter in all of baseball. He's been excellent. Willie Castro, again for the Twins. He's been one of the best utility guys. He's played nearly every position except for, catcher. I think he's pitched too this year, and he's just hit. He's the spark plug on that team. In the similar realm, you've got Josh Smith in Texas. Of course, they have 2 All-Stars that got named. I think Josh Smith deserves it more than Marcus Semien, so I'm kind of shocked that he didn't get the nod. I guess Semien's been there before. At that point, it's the coaches that picked those guys, so he probably got a little bit more favoritism. Jordan Westburg, of course, Baltimore's had a ton of All-Stars, but he's a guy that didn't make it that probably should have. Again, I think the starting lineup is pretty clear-cut. I wouldn't really change much within the starting lineup, but you look at some of the reserves, and this is the big question. Does every team need to be represented at the All-Star game? You look at a team like Oakland, sure, they're not very good, but absolutely Mason Miller deserves to be at the All-Star game. But then maybe you look at something like Tampa, and this is no shade at Isaac Paredes. I just think that I would probably put Jose Miranda, Josh Smith, or Jordan Westburg over Isaac in that role. Now, I'm sure there's some statistic out there that says, having Isaac Paredes, and this is just a happenstance that I'm picking his name, but having him at the All-Star game somehow makes more eyes for Tampa fans on the All-Star game. I don't know. In my time, I've lived through some bad Twins teams where we have just one lowly All-Star representative that maybe doesn't deserve to be there. And seeing one inning pitched or one at bat, I don't know. That isn't enough of a draw. I don't care. If Brandon Kintzler didn't make the All-Star game, I would still tune in. I didn't need to see him pitch, you know what I mean? And then for pitching, it's tough again because some of these guys probably will be replaced. I would like to see maybe Eric Fetty, Tanner Bybee, George Kirby as a couple starting pitchers that I think narrowly just missed the cut. And relief pitchers, I do think, and I get why closing pitchers get more representation. They're typically seen as the best pitcher, the best reliever on that staff, but Griffin Jacks, Hunter Gaddis, Taylor Scott, Cade Smith, those are guys, they're not closing pitchers, but they've been damn good for their respective ball clubs. We'll move on to the National League, where I think there's also some pretty clear snubs, guys that have had incredible seasons that are not making it for one reason or another. I think the biggest one there is Francisco Lindor. At this point in baseball discourse, I don't know if there's a more polarizing figure than Francisco Lindor. He plays for a big market team in New York. He's on a huge contract. He's making a lot of money. And if you look at traditionalist statistics like batting average, for example, you wouldn't see him as like this star player. But when you look deeper, if you look at the base running value. If you look at what he brings to you defensively and offensively too, he got off to a slow start, but he's been very good hitting ever since. I mean, he's been, I believe, a top 5 player within the National League in terms of FWAR. And he's not represented at the All-Star game, which is just a shame. His teammate Brandon Nimmo, another guy, he's got really good offensive numbers. A WRC plus at about 135, and he homered today. He's not going to be there. Christian Walker in the desert, he's not at the All-Star game. A couple young guys in Milwaukee, Joey Ortiz and Bryce Terang, they're also not represented at the Midsummer Classic, and it's just a shame. Now, some of these guys, we talked about Mookie Betts. You know, shortstop, I could see maybe Lindor filling in on that role, which is great. And I don't think it takes anything away from somebody that they're a replacement all-star. And there's only so many spots. You're not going to have 50 members of the all-star team just so everybody gets a gold star, right? I just think these guys, you can't really keep them out of the all-star game the way that they've been playing. And they probably deserve a bit of a nudge over some of the guys that are in there. And maybe if you didn't have the guaranteed all-star rule, it would be a little bit better. For pitchers, again, I think Sonny Gray in St. Louis has been really good this year, so maybe he could find a way in there. Relief pitchers, Orion Kerkering, Jeremiah Estrada, Brian Hudson, and Ryan Walker are a couple, and there's more. It's always difficult to pick pitchers, as I've said, especially relief pitchers for that matter, because most teams have a standout relief pitcher. That's just how it is. But you can't have like 15 members of the bullpen. There's only so many seats on the plane. Only so many spots on the bus to go to the ballpark. So I am excited for the All-Star game. I'm sure there's going to be more changes to the All-Star roster coming forward. There's going to be guys, for one reason or another, not making the trip to Arlington, and there's going to be someone to replace them, and maybe that'll shut all of us up, and we'll all be happy. I hope so, but I doubt it, because nobody can be. No one's more miserable than baseball fans this day and age. Everybody's got to be upset about something. But let me know your reactions to the All-Star rosters for the American and National League being officially revealed. And let me know your biggest snubs. Who do you think should be there but has not been listed thus far? Leave a like if you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe to the channel, and thank you for watching.